Good evening, everybody. For one of you who may not know me personally, I'm Joey Regan, and I am a first grade teacher at the South Area Solomon Schechter Day School. And I taught the Generations unit, which has been taught by many of my predecessors, including one who is seated in this very room. And let's begin. Before I begin, I just want to take a moment to thank Marcia Shimshak, my mentor, who has been just an unfailing, terrific support for me throughout this unit, and to thank Cindy Shulak-Rome for her help and encouragement during the unit, and also to thank Shira Horowitz, who looked over my unit and helped us in the editing process, which was wonderful. So, we'll jump right into it. The big ideas and essential questions. So the first big idea that I focused on was that our lives are similar and different from the lives of our elders when they were children. And by our, I mean our students' lives are similar and different from the lives of their elders. And the essential questions that tied in with this big idea was, how are our lives similar and different? And how can we learn about what life was like when our elders were children? The next big idea was a biography can teach us about the early life of our elder. And I asked the question, what can a biography teach us about our elder? And how can we learn about what life was like when our elders were children? Sort of, again, that ties in with that big idea. And the next, and I think the final big idea I'm going to explore, is that Jewish texts give us guidance on how to behave respectfully towards elders. So we tried to explore what some Jewish texts have to say about the relationship between generations, and how can we treat elders respectfully. So, just to give you a little overview of the unit, we started with an elder survey that I'm going to discuss briefly. Basically, that the elder and the first grader and their elder filled out, and we did a pre-assessment surrounding that survey. And then we moved on to how we treat our elders respectfully, and then we introduced the genre biography. And then there was sort of the bulk of the student work that got done, which was the elder interview and timeline, the Venn diagram, and the full biography, and then words of wisdom. So the elder survey, which I have two examples sort of pasted up here. So I introduced this topic to my students right before Passover, and I asked them to choose an elder or special person for them to study. And there is one instance in our classroom of a child who didn't have what we would consider sort of a traditional elder, no grandparents, no relatives really, sort of past her own mother's age. So I made it clear to the students at that point, and again, when we introduced the unit formally, that an elder for the purposes of our unit was anyone who was sort of our parents' age or above. And the students were asked to not only choose an elder or special person, but they were then presented with a survey for their elder and themselves to fill out over Passover break. And I connected this to DeLeT Standard 1E, which is respects and learns about families, diverse religious practices, cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds, and family structures. And I think from the beginning of the year, the focus is really, of course, it's learning about what your child is like and what their family is like, but I think this really gave me a very concrete and formal chance to start to explore that standard in particular that I really hadn't had before, and I think we all were able to learn so much about our own families and our fellow students' families. So the next step was the pre-assessment, where we attempted to define the word elder, which was more of a challenge than I had initially anticipated. Particularly this question of elder versus elderly. A lot of the students were very happy to substitute one for the other, and we tried to draw a distinction between them. And then again, we were refining elder as it applies to our unit, and sort of a poignant moment, I suppose, is a girl in our class had an older sister in 4th grade and asked, it's not possible that Danielle is my elder. I mean, surely not. So we agreed that in fact she was her elder, but not for sort of purposes of this unit. And then the actual pre-assessment was about visualizing our elders as first graders, and we'll talk about that right now. So I'm actually going to introduce now a brief teaching sample, and this is from the first lesson of our Generations unit, and it's following the completion of the discussion about the meaning of the word elder. And I just finished passing around pictures of myself as a first grader and my mother as a first grader, and I had, of course, chosen my mother as my elder because I have no grandparents or sort of, elders as we would maybe more traditionally define them, or students might sort of traditionally see them. So, I'd like you to sort of keep in mind when you're watching this, some of the things that I see as sort of areas of growth for myself was my timing and pacing, and that relates to DeLeT Standard 2E, develops procedures for the smooth operation of the classroom and the efficient use of time. That's a challenge I've had all year, sort of learning how not to let conversations get drawn out, or being in command of discussions, and that's something I've worked hard on. And the next point I'd like you to keep in mind is integrating earlier work on visualization, and actually did a mini unit on visualization. I did my own mini unit, and then I did my predecessor's mini unit as well on visualization, so we were able to connect information and ideas within and across subjects and between general and Jewish studies. And this was obviously when you begin teaching, first month, first couple of months, there's not really a lot of opportunity, at least there wasn't in my case, to integrate earlier work and to see what that was like. And now it seems to flow a little bit more naturally, and hopefully you'll get to see a little of that. And the last part that you'll notice, hopefully, is that the pre-assessment was based on the visualization. And I saw this pre-assessment as an informal assessment, some way to get a sense of how the kids see themselves as well as their elders in first grade, if they can draw a little bit of information out of their survey and about what they know about their elders. So I now present you.
Why do you think I brought these pictures in to show you? Why do you think I brought them in to show you?
You'll have
a chance to look at them later. I'm not going to take them home. You'll have a chance to look at them. Emily.
Because we're studying generations, and generations are you, your dad, your dad,
Right. Okay, so that's one reason. Okay, so that's one reason. Absolutely. Can anyone else think of why I brought that in? Why did I bring in pictures of me as a first grader, do you think? And my mom as a first grader. David.
Because we're first grade and you're teaching first grade.
Yeah, that's definitely
And that's
one
why
reason.
you made the question of when you were first grade for the elderly.
For the elders survey. That's a great connection, David. That's exactly right. And I'm not going to take any more hands right now because we're going to move on. But that's exactly right. Those are two exact reasons. The first is, I think the first is what David said. I want to show everyone that every adult you've seen around was once your age, including my mom, including me. And there are pictures of it. And I'm sure we all have it. I don't even want to start talking about including everyone, but every adult you see was once your age. And the other important thing is we're going to be learning about generations, and those pictures had generations in them, generations of people. My father, my grandfather, my mom, my aunt. So here's what we're going to do though. The first thing we're going to do today, we're going to be visualizing again. Can someone remind me what it means to visualize? Very quickly, visualize. Jordan.
Visualize, see pictures in your head and draw them.
Make a picture in your mind, exactly right. This is what we're going to do.
Karen?
And I hope everyone's listening because this is where you guys come in for helping me out today.
Wait 1 second, Joey. Not everybody's looking at you, so I can't tell if they're really listening.
Okay. Thank you. So we are going to visualize our elder today. We've all had a chance to choose an elder. Could be your parent, could be an aunt or uncle, could be your grandparent, could be a friend, family.
Adopted grandparent.
Could be a adopted grandparent. You're going to be visualizing. So right now, take a minute, close your eyes, make a picture of the elder you chose in your head right now. Make a picture of the elder in your head right now that you chose. Elon, you have a picture in your head of the elder you chose? I'm talking to you as well. I'm talking to everyone. Make a picture in your head of the elder you chose. Now, with your eyes still closed, just listen to the words I'm saying. We're going to visualize what you...
Okay, so I'm going to move on from there. So after the pre-assessment, we went on to treating our elders respectfully. So in this sort of chunk of the unit, we talked about Parshat Kedoshim, and there was a specific quote from Parshat Kedoshim where we talked about rising before our elders. And the kids actually, I had a student come into the room and we all rose for him, and to get a sense of what that really meant, it felt like. We then talked about respectful interview techniques, because I wanted to have the students make contact again with their elders in another sort of forum. And we really ended up distilling it down to sort of listening and showing interest and being respectful. And then the biography as being inherently respectful. That you can't write a biography about someone unless you care about their lives or are interested in them. So when we talked about the biography unit, these are the 3 biographies I chose to focus on, each for a different reason. For example, I chose My Uncle Martin's Big Heart because that's a biography written by Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece about him, and we were going to be writing a biography about our elders. So the student work. So I posted here an example of the timeline they worked on. And the idea, the timeline's not a perfect timeline in the sense that the dates aren't spaced out exactly right, to scale in terms of time. But I chose this one because we asked the students to interview their elders and to get 3 or 4 important dates from their elders' lives, including their elder's birthday, and they would be able to sort of represent that in a timeline after an exercise in class where the students lined themselves up by a birth date. So here, the second entry was my grandma met grandpa, and grandma is saying, hi, and it sort of humanized that moment. It really get a sense of being in that moment, which I really liked. The next thing we worked on was a Venn diagram, which you can see. It was about the students and their elders took an inventory of what they had in their home. And it was things our elder had, things our students have, and things we both had. And that led to a discussion that this is a good example of one of the Venn diagrams where there's really nothing on the things our elder had only side. It's sort of a discussion of what that meant. And it sort of raised interesting questions about whether we should be sad for our elders because they didn't have all the toys we had and they could play outside. Yeah. So then we got to creating our elder biography, which was about analyzing the data from the surveys. And I did it pretty structured in a sort of formal way where I had them filling out forms, basically, filling out sheets, doing worksheets, where they would take parts of the elder survey and use them to compare their own lives in certain aspects of their life. For example, what we eat for breakfast or what our favorite dinner food is, and what our elders' favorite dinner food was and what they ate for breakfast. So I brought an example of my model biography, and I have all my student work here, and you're welcome to come take a look at it after, and I encourage you to do so. And the last element was about words of wisdom, and this was a big chunk of our unit, and that was we focused on what our elders can teach us just by passing down their stories. So that included learning about Lidor by Dor, passing down our elders' stories to us, and that was a responsibility of our elders. And then we talked about, we studied a page from the Mishnah, and the students found it really tough, actually. There's a quote here, and it was extremely difficult. And then the students had an opportunity to explain what their elders' words of wisdom mean to us. And I thought this connected well with DeLeT Standard 2A about infusing Jewish experiences and values into the learning environment. And again, it was about integrating, this time, Judaism. And because the unit was so broad in its scope, it really gave me an opportunity to explore different elements of how it connected. So there's some additions to our unit that we didn't start with. We incorporated Grandparents' Day and Special Visitors Day, and an heirloom exhibit, and an old-time museum. And then my final slide is about things I would do differently. And I think looking back at it, the biography isn't really, if you look at my biography or you look at some of the work that the kids did, it's not really a traditional biography in the sense that they're writing a story in prose. So I think might have been a different way to go about doing that, and we're now trying to work on incorporating that. The Talmud page, I'd have to rejigger that in general. I think that was really a little bit beyond the kids' understanding. The way I took the approach to that was a little different. And then I still want to foster a deeper connection between the student and their elder. I found sometimes that the students saw their elders sort of as whatever was represented by that piece of paper and in the survey, and I think there might have been another or more opportunities for me to change it. So I left a final quote that I'll just leave on the board, but we're done. So I had the kids do a dedication page at the end, and a couple of these were very sweet. So thank you very much, and please, I welcome any questions or comments.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes for some questions and discussion. What do you think for the list?
So, Joe,
Yes.
I'm so thrilled that you put a Venn diagram in there. I think
Yes.
So I was thinking another math connection might be for them to actually predict how many great-grandparents they have. I mean, if they looked at, I've got 2 parents, and how many grandparents, could you find out how many great-grandparents you have? So I'm just thinking that might be, because it's hard to find the math in these things, so I think that might be.
And we did do a family tree. Actually wasn't there that day, but I know we worked on a family tree that we managed to connect a little bit to the generations using through Parshat HaShavua. So that would have been a great way to incorporate it. Yeah, yeah, and this was a nice way. Yeah.
Oh, it's
to do a little
beautiful.
math.
It's
It was good.
beautiful.
It was good. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I jotted a couple of notes. One thing that struck me about the Venn diagram in particular, were you just speaking about material things? Because I mean, the first thing I thought, like, they had more unstructured time, and they had, and did that come up?
It did. You know, it didn't. It came up only in the sense that sort of informally, because the kids realized that they had to be doing something if they weren't doing whatever they do now, watch TV or play video games. So we were able to talk about how maybe it would be nice to be outside more or to talk to other people more face to face. But yeah, that's certainly not what we did. It was more about, yeah, it was about material things in this case, absolutely. Yeah.
I have a question.
Please. Yeah.
So on their survey, how did you deal with the kids' different reading abilities for this? Because I remember that was really challenging.
Yeah, so it wasn't even the best readers couldn't read some of the handwriting that we got back,
Yeah.
so I had to transcribe some of it. And luckily a number of them were typed, and I ended up basically chunking the survey into what parts that I needed for that specific day, and then transcribing parts of it. And being, for some of the kids, with reading, just being there sort of on top of them and being ready to help.
Yeah.
So, and then with the writing side, and I have some examples, some of the kids with fine motor issues also have their own paper, so we incorporated that also into their work as well. So they were able to write on their own paper, not my worksheets, which their lines were sort of like this, sort of the unlined, more adult, I guess.
I have another question.
Please keep going.
Did you find that your unit became more focused on one big idea more than another as time went on?
So I would say that
That's a great question.
I still have sort of uncertainty. I think the thing that they got most out of it was the idea of how we behave respectfully towards our elders. Still more than anything, even though they did a lot of writing and a lot of work, I think that's the thing that sunk in, because those are the things that were more hands-on experiences, ultimately. So ultimately, I think that's what, and we were able to incorporate Grandparents' Day into that, so we could actually see ourselves, our model behavior towards our elders, some of their very elders that they had chosen. So I think that more than anything really stood out, and which is strange to me because I thought this was really about a biography. But there's something about the writing, and that was one of the things I think I would change going forward about, you know, it's really hard for some of the kids to write, and doing a lot of writing for them becomes a chore to some kids still. So it's difficult. So, you know, it's something that I think I'd want to sprinkle in a little more, you know, just spread it out a little more, I suppose. So, yeah.
I thought it was amazing the way Joey got the kids that have a hard time with writing and reading, that he got them motivated, and they really, I mean, sometimes you'd hear, oh, do I really have to, but it was rare.
Yeah.
And I thought he was able to get the kids engaged most of the time in discussions. Some of the kids, you know, it's one of the things we're working on, getting everybody engaged in discussions and writing, and sometimes it's the same kids, sometimes it's not, but
Yeah.
really, it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. It's certainly some great surprises, and it, in general, it was exciting and fun and different. So,
Joey, could you put the big ideas up again?
yeah, sure. Sorry, that's right. So this, for example, this particular big idea, this was really like the crux of the biography, sort of comparing our lives to our elders' lives. And I'm not sure, because it was so structured with the worksheets that I did, I'm not sure how much they took out of it still. I'm not exactly sure, you know?
Do you have a way that you could assess that further, do you think?
Well, now we're actually asking them to sort of take their data again. So now they had data, now they sort of re-represented their data on these worksheets, and now we're asking them to sort of try and craft a little story out of it. And, you know, and there's only really about half the class at this point is working on that. The other half is still sort of catching up. So it's hard, I think, for that half, I think that's an easier thing. I mean, going forward, though, I'd have to think about how I could do that in a different way.
It's interesting, as you said, that you feel they took more from this about respecting elders, more of a values piece.
Right.
Would you, if you had to do it again, teach it more with a different big idea in mind? Or would you craft it differently because this is the big idea you really wish you had gotten at?
You know, I think it's a nice assessment, and I think it really, but I know where, you know, that's not really, you know, so I like the idea of the biography, and I still do. I'm not sure they're ready for it 100%. Would I teach the other part more? Yeah, I might add a little more of that in. And, you know, I think the things that they took most, you know, I think these were actually the sort of bigger projects, were, I think, sort of more meaningful and sort of lasting. So, you know, I don't know. I think I probably would teach a little more about respect.
So are there other ways you might have set up the biography? Because what you mentioned, and there's still the time of the half the kids who are working on it, you had mentioned the idea that they got into the respect because they could actually do it. So are there ways that they could think about being more actively engaged?
Right, like acting out their lives or their grandparents' lives, of course, absolutely. And now I've asked them after the fact also, in addition, I've asked all the students to sort of write a memory of themselves with their elder as a sort of an addition, as more of a free writing sort of piece that everyone has actually gotten to. So, yeah, I certainly think there are other ways.
That's interesting that you just said that everyone has gotten to, because that might be interesting for you to think about, things that everybody gets to, things that only you get to.
Yeah.
Why that happens, how could it be restructured,
Absolutely.
that kind of question. My other question was actually about the so-called comment page, and wondered whether they had any experiences before this unit in getting them ready for that.
Right, no, you know, we rarely study direct, well, I shouldn't say rarely. We do a lot of work on Parshat and Shavua, and there are quotes there. I think this quote in particular, which was, blessed is the generation where the old listen to the young, doubly blessed is the generation where the young listen to the old. I think I gave the kids a little too much credit as to how much they could understand, just the sort of basic vocabulary about blessed versus doubly blessed, you know, like things like that. I really think I could have tightened that up and made it sort of even more clear and in better kid language, and they probably could have taken something out of that. I mean, after we sort of worked at it over and over for this one lesson, you know, and we finally sort of distilled what the meaning of that was, then they could start to talk about it, but you know, yeah, and they had not really seen the Talmud like that. I mean, you know, I actually posted that page from the Talmud that day, like I said, our morning message. So, and just asked them, what is this, you know? But yeah, really nothing beyond that.
One more minute. Anybody has any last questions or comments?
I just wanted to say, you mentioned in the beginning about your pacing, you wanted to be. I was actually quite impressed with how you moved the conversation along when you needed to, so it wasn't a concern. In fact, I thought your questioning techniques were quite lovely in the way that you brought kids in and you had them, you validated their thoughts. So I just wanted to let you know that I didn't see that as a concern when I
Yeah, no, when I showed this because I thought it was pretty good. It was better than I don't think it used to be so good. It's gotten a lot better. Just say that, you know. I made a concerted effort to make it better because I agree. I thought it was pretty good, and in the past, though, I'd start to sort of go to everyone all the time, and
Right.
start to get out of hand, and the kids would be sitting around. And, yeah.
So Joy, I'll just add one closing observation, which was it was really a delight to be in the classroom for some of your lessons and to see the enthusiasm. The kids would come in from recess or wherever they're, are we doing generations now? And just would very eagerly and enthusiastically kind of come to the circle or to their seats. And clearly this engaged them in many ways. And it's really
Yeah, thank you very much. They got a big kick out of it. So did I, and so did Marsha and us.
Yeah.
It was great.
I felt like I didn't want it to end.
Yeah.
This is so amazing.
Yeah.
all right.
Thank you.